the regular meeting of council for the corporation of the municipality of Central Elgin. If I could ask, first of all, welcome everyone that's joining us in the gallery and then joining us online. If I could ask that we now stand for the national anthem. Thank you very much. The municipality of Central Elgin acknowledges that it is located on the land of the McKee Treaty that was signed by the Wyandot and Anishinaabe nations, including ancestors of the Chippewas of the Thames First Nation. It is also the traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee, Attawandaronk, and Mississauga Nation. These First Nations continue to provide ongoing stewardship of the land and waters in the municipality of Central Elgin. Council, could I ask if anyone has a disclosure of pecuniary interest and the general nature thereof? Seeing none. Adoption of the minutes. Any questions or comments for the minutes regarding the special meeting of council dated Monday, April 5th? Any questions or comments of the adoption of minutes for the regular meeting of council dated Tuesday, April 11th? If I could get a mover and a seconder. Deputy Mayor Noble and Councillor Bachman, thank you.
Mayor Sloan, the motion reads, moved by Deputy Mayor Noble, seconded by Councillor Bachman, that the minutes from the special meeting of council held on April 5th, 2023, and the regular meeting of council held on April 11th, 2023 be adopted.
All those in favor? Opposed and carried. We have a delegation this evening. Mr. David Aston from MHBC Planning Urban Design and Landscape Architecture is presenting a project update on the Talbot Line Employment Lands. Mr. Aston, please.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of council. Thanks for the opportunity to be here this evening and present to you with regard to the report before you for consideration, and want to acknowledge Mr. Perrin and collaboration with him in bringing this report forward to you. My understanding is you have the report and there's two recommendations associated with the report, one to receive for information and the second to provide direction with regards to holding a public meeting as required under the Planning Act requirements for a bylaw. So tonight, I just wanted to give an overview and I have just a brief presentation on what's being proposed relative to the proposed zoning bylaw as it relates to the lands that we're referencing as the Talbot Line industrial lands. And just as information, will be having a follow-up meeting with the landowners this week in an open house format Wednesday evening to obtain information and follow up with the landowners from the first landowner meeting that we held that provided a lot of good input in consideration of the report and the draft bylaw for consideration. So with that, I have a presentation and I'll share my screen here. And just would like to confirm, Mr. Mayor, can everyone see that? I can't see both things at once.
Yes, we can, sir.
Great, thank you. So the presentation this evening really just looking at the portion of the Talbot Line Industrial Lands within the municipality of Central Elgin. The purpose of this process was to rezone the lands for future consideration of employment uses and implement the official plan and land use. So the intent of the municipal-led process to establish or pre-zone the zoning of the lands that would provide opportunity for the lands to be shovel-ready. With this process, the landowners or the lands would be pre-zoned for the industrial uses, which would then just facilitate the need for any future planning approvals associated with site plan or plan of subdivision in support of trying to provide an opportunity to expedite the development of the employment lands. The municipal-led approach also provides for more of a comprehensive opportunity to review all of the lands relative to the existing land uses, other considerations such as land use compatibility, and also the official plan permissions in a larger, broader context. So when this process started, the lands were much larger and now just reflect the lands within the municipality based on the recent boundary adjustment through Bill 63. So the lands have a mix of official plan designation. The gray lands, which is really the majority of the lands, is major industrial. And this is, the designation that provides a full range of different types of manufacturing, fabricating, assembling, warehouse storage, service operations, intermodal facilities. So it's kind of the more general type industrial uses. The commercial industrial zone provides more of a mix between some industrial related uses, service uses, and commercial uses. What you also see on the plan is kind of a black line, which is a natural hazard overlay. And what this is identifying is that there are hazards. Those need to be understood and studied, but the underlying official plan designation is still in place. So it's essentially establishing an area where further detailed study would need to be considered for future development. This is a plan showing the existing zoning, so a mix again of open space zones that's permitting existing residential uses. There's various site-specific uses that are permitting a different range from hotels to farm implement service operations. And so it's a bit of a hodgepodge of zoning, and the purpose really of the proposed zoning bylaws to look at the entire block and zone it relative to the official plan. Some of these zoning categories, again, aren't implementing the official plan as it is now. A newer official plan and the zoning is older than the official plan. So it's quite common. And now we're looking to catch up the zoning with the existing official plan. One of the questions that came up through discussions with the landowners was compatibility. The ministry has land use compatibility guidelines, and these are called the D6 series of guidelines. So we've completed an analysis of the various classes of industrial uses, which range from class 1 to a class 3. And those range in kind of intensity, scale of operation, and kind of magnitude of movement on the site. What's being proposed in this area of lands includes class 1 and class 2 facilities. So there are no class 3 facilities, which would be your large industrial uses that create a lot of noise, a lot of dust, or a lot of odor, have a lot of truck movement. So we've limited consideration to class 1 and 2 facilities based on the location of other sensitive land uses. And sensitive land uses in this context really relate to the existing residential uses. So the guidelines have a recommended setback with the class 1 and 2 uses. You can see on this plan, the orange line represents a 20-meter setback from existing sensitive uses, which is the class 1 facilities. And the yellow line represents a minimum 70-meter setback, which is the class 2 facilities. And so this factored into our consideration of where we would draw proposed zone limits to ensure that the more general or the heavier type of industrial uses would be separated or set back from the existing sensitive land uses. So that reflects into the proposed zoning. We're proposing 2 brand new zoning categories, C1A and a C1B, a light industrial zone and a general industrial zone. So the light industrial zone picks up on the existing industrial commercial designation, and then also the setback requirement from the existing residential uses on the easterly portion of the lands. The blue area that you see is an existing approved zoning with a plan of subdivision. We're not proposing to change that zoning. It went through a site-specific process and has that zoning. And so what's being proposed is the industrial commercial area of the official plan is the light industrial, and then the yellow is the major industrial. We're calling it more of a general industrial zone. You'll also see the zoning overlay. So we've picked up the natural hazard overlay as as an implementation or further consideration of the official plan policy. And that simply reflects that as an overlay with the underlying designations and zoning in place, but it would require at site plan approval or other development application an awareness of that overlay and what is there, and some future analysis associated with the feature associated with the overlay. So as we looked at the different types of permitted uses, we worked ourselves back into the official plan to compare the industrial commercial and the general industrial land uses. So we've kind of taken a look at the mix of uses between the light industrial and general industrial. And you can see the general industrial includes contractor's yard, the service shop, food and beverage manufacturing, general industrial uses, industrial mall, for example. The light industrial uses includes business office clinic. And what the number 1 indicates is that we've introduced the concept of an industrial mall. So these types of uses could be located within that area, within a building of another permitted use. So really trying to encourage those types of uses to locate together. The other thing just to point out is that there are a number of existing zones along kind of the southern boundary of the property. And a number of them have site-specific existing permissions. So we simply just wanted to identify existing uses that legally existed on the date of passing a bylaw. So those uses will continue to be able to locate there, be used for what they've been approved in a legal way under this type of recognition. The alternative would be to not recognize those existing uses, and then they become legal non-conforming uses. And then when the uses cease, then that use then ceases over time. But we heard through the landowner discussions, there's a lot of concern of people losing the right to use their lands as they currently do. So we wanted to make sure that that their existing uses were maintained. And this is just another slide that shows different types of permitted uses relative to the different zones. Regulations, again, because we're really introducing 2 new zoning categories, we're introducing proposed zoning regulations for the 2 categories. These generally coincide with the bylaw currently. There's some areas where we've added additional information, such as a minimum setback for the primary use to an open space zone permitting a residential use. Again, that's just to ensure that that land use compatibility component is addressed, and that can be further refined based on land use compatibility study requirement that would be submitted and approved by the municipality. So it speaks to building height, open space, and then identification of parking requirements. So this bylaw is identifying the permitted uses, the regulations for the uses, and then it also includes a number of, if I just go back up, a number of these uses aren't currently defined within the bylaw, or they're considered in a different context. So the draft bylaw includes a number of definitions of uses to clarify in the context of these lands what is permitted. So our next steps are to hold the landowner meeting, which is the second meeting in which we'll have a number of boards set up. Many of them were the slides this evening showing the proposed zoning, the uses, the regulations, and the definitions, and obtain feedback through that process. We'll be obtaining feedback through other agency review and circulation as well, with the intent to circulate the notice of the formal public meeting that would be held in May, and the objective to moving forward to bring back a recommendation report for consideration by council in June of 2023. And so that's my presentation for this evening, and happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Aston. Any questions or comments from council? Any questions or comments from staff? Very good. Thank you for your time, and I'm sure everyone will look forward to the meeting that's coming on Wednesday.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Moving on to correspondence. Item number 1, Port Stanley Lions Club. Comments or thoughts here? I'm sure you've all looked through the letter requesting us with a request for council approval of the club's proposed installation of post people in the village. Councillor Graham.
For this, I would like them to work with the BIA for placement of this, and obviously with the municipality. I don't think either of those locations are really ideal. One is a bit in a zone where the snowplow goes, and the other one is right beside a location that's currently has a post person in it. So I'd like to support it, but not the location, and that they work with the BIA to do so.
Thank you. Any questions or comments? Okay, perhaps we could do a follow-up, Councillor Graham, and have a discussion with the Morton Stanley Lions Club and table this for the next meeting?
Yeah.
Is that the will of the council? Thank you. We also have received for information, County Council highlights from April 11th and a letter from the Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing regarding helping homebuyers protecting Tenants Act. I'm not sure. I took a quick look through. I don't know if there's anything staff have any comments or council about how it might pertain to us. The one piece of information I thought was interesting about a cooling off period after someone buys a home. It might have its own issues, I'm sure. And seeing any other questions, we can take that in for information. Do I need a mover and seconder? I get a mover and a seconder. Councillor Watson and Councillor Halpin, please.
Mayor Sloan, the motion reads, moved by Councillor Watson, seconded by Councillor Halpin, that correspondence items number 1 and 2 be received for information and filed.
All those in favor? Opposed and carried. Now on to report, Central Elgin Planning Office, CEP 1923, consent application, 7th Avenue, Belmont. Questions or comments from council? If I can get a mover and a seconder. Councillor Bachman, Councillor Connors.
Mayor Sloan, the motion reads, moved by Councillor Bogman, seconded by Councillor Connors, that report CEP 1923 be received for information and that council has no objections to consent application E2723 7th Avenue applicant Craig Home Estates Limited, subject to the recommended conditions. A copy of the reference plan be provided to the municipality of Central Elgin and a drainage reassessment be done if necessary at the owner's expense.
All those in favor? Opposed and carried. Number 2, CEP 20.23, 214 William Street, Port Stanley. Questions or comments? Mover and a seconder, please. Councillor Halpin, Deputy Mayor Noble.
Mayor Sloan, the motion reads, moved by Councillor Halpin, seconded by Deputy Mayor Noble, that report CEP 2023 be received for information and that council has no objections to consent application E2823, Part Lot 20, Plan 201, 214 William Street, applicant 2835981, Ontario, Inc., subject to the recommended conditions. The applicant enters into a development agreement with the municipality of Central Elgin to address administrative, technical, and financial matters, including the recommendations outlined in the geotechnical investigation and slope assessment and issues scoping report. The applicant conveys to the municipality of Central Elgin at no cost and free of all charge and encumbrances the proposed road widening identified on the severance sketch completed by MTE, Ontario Land Surveyors Limited, dated January 17th, 2023, to the satisfaction of the Director of Asset Management and Development, Municipality of Central Elgin. The applicant removes the existing concrete block garage identified on the severance sketch completed by MTE, Ontario Land Surveyors Limited, dated January 17th, 2023, and completes the recommendations outlined in the evaluation report prepared by DCBU CK Engineering dated November 23rd, 2022 to the satisfaction of the Chief Building Official, Municipality of Central Elgin. The severed lands be merged in title with the abutting lands to the north, Part Lot 18, Plan 201. That subsection 3 or 5 of Section 50 of the Planning Act, as amended, shall apply to any subsequent conveyance or transaction involving the subject lands. The solicitor for the applicant is to provide an undertaking whereby they inform the committee in writing that the lands are being conveyed to an abutting property owner and thus a merger of title will take place, which merger shall include all interest held inclusive or mortgagee's interest. A copy of the reference plan be provided to the municipality of Central Elgin and a drainage reassessment be done at, if necessary, at the owner's expense.
Thank you, Ms. Leach. All those in favor? Opposed and carried. CEP 2123, consent application 214 William Street, Mover and seconder, please. Councillor Connors, Deputy Mayor Noble.
Mayor Sloan, the motion reads, moved by Councillor Connors, seconded by Deputy Mayor Noble, that report CEP 2123 be received for information, and that council has no objections to the consent application E2923, Part Lot 20, Plan 201, 214 William Street, applicant 2835981, Ontario, Inc., subject to the recommended conditions. The applicant enters into a development agreement with the Municipality of Central Elgin to address administrative, technical, and financial matters, including the recommendations outlined in the geotechnical investigation and slope assessment and issue scoping report. The applicant conveys to the Municipality of Central Elgin at no cost and free of all charge and encumbrances the proposed road widening identified on the severance sketch completed by MTE, Ontario Land Surveyors Limited, dated January 17th, 2023, to the satisfaction of the Director of Asset Management and Development, Municipality of Central Elgin. The applicant removes the existing concrete block garage identified on the severance sketch completed by MTE, Ontario Land Surveyors Limited, dated January 17th, 2023, and completes the recommendations outlined in the evaluation report prepared by DCBUCK Engineering, dated November 23rd, 2022, to the satisfaction of the Chief Building Official, Municipality of Central Elgin. The severed lands be merged in title with the abutting lands to the north, Part Lot 19, Plan 201. That subsection 3 or 5 of Section 50 of the Planning Act as amended shall apply to any subsequent conveyance or transaction involving the subject lands. The solicitor for the applicant is to provide an undertaking whereby they inform the committee in writing that the lands are being conveyed to an abutting property owner and thus a merger of title will take place, which merger shall include all interests held inclusive or mortgagee's interest. A copy of the reference plan be provided to the Municipality of Central Elgin and a drainage reassessment be done if necessary at the owner's expense.
Thank you. All those in favor? Opposed? And carried. If I could get a mover and a seconder for CEP 22.23, please. Councillor Halpin, Deputy Mayor Noble.
Mayor Sloan, the motion reads, moved by Councillor Halpin, seconded by Deputy Mayor Noble, that report CEP 2223 be received for information, and that council has no objections to consent application E3023, Part Lot 19, Plan 201, 214 William Street, applicant 2835981, Ontario, Inc., subject to the recommended conditions. The applicant enters into a development agreement with the Municipality of Central Elgin to address administrative, technical, and financial matters, including the recommendations outlined in the geotechnical investigation and slope assessment and issue scoping report. The applicant conveys to the Municipality of Central Elgin at no cost and free of all charge and encumbrances the proposed road widening identified on the severance sketch completed by MTE, Ontario Land Surveyors Limited, dated January 17th, 2023, to the satisfaction of the Director of Asset Management and Development, Municipality of Central Elgin. The applicant removes the existing concrete block garage identified on the severance sketch completed by MTE, Ontario Land Surveyors Limited, dated January 17th, 2023, and completes the recommendations outlined in the evaluation report prepared by DCBUCK Engineering, dated November 23rd, 2022, to the satisfaction of the Chief Building Official, Municipality of Central Elgin. The severed lands be merged in title with the abutting lands to the west, Part Lot 18, Plan 201. That subsection 3 or 5 of Section 50 of the Planning Act as amended shall apply to any subsequent conveyance or transaction involving the subject lands. The solicitor for the applicant is to provide an undertaking whereby they inform the committee in writing that the lands are being conveyed to an abutting property owner and thus a merger of title will take place, which merger shall include all interests held inclusive or mortgagee's interest. A copy of the reference plan be provided to the Municipality of Central Elgin and a drainage reassessment be done if necessary at the owner's expense.
All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. CP 2323, Draft County of Elgin Official Plan Technical Circulation. If I could get a mover and a seconder. Councillor Graham, Councillor Bachman.
Mayor Sloan, the motion reads, moved by Councillor Graham, seconded by Councillor Bachman, that report CEP 2323 be received, and that council endorse the municipal commenting table on Appendix A to report CEP 2323, and that council directs staff to circulate Appendix A to the County of Elgin as formal comments from the municipality of Central Elgin in advance of a county decision on its official plan. And further, that council directs staff to continue to work with the County of Elgin to resolve any issues that have been raised and minimize any potential impacts on the municipality.
All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. By CEP 2423, consent application for Southdale Line. A mover and a seconder, please. Councillor Connors, Councillor Halpin. Thank you.
Mayor Sloan, the motion reads, moved by Councillor Connors, seconded by Councillor Halpin, that report CEP 2423 be received for information, and that council has no objections to consent application E3223 42489 Southdale Line, applicant Bradley Zylstra, subject to the recommended conditions. The applicant enters into a development agreement with the municipality of Central Elgin to address administrative, technical, and financial matters. Confirmation that parcel A retained has been connected to municipal services to the satisfaction of the Director of Asset Management and Development, Municipality of Central Elgin. Confirmation of a zoning bylaw amendment to permit residential use on parcel B severed. The severed lands be merged with the abutting lands to the south, Block 75, Plan 11M 242. That subsection 3 or 5 of Section 50 of the Planning Act as amended shall apply to any subsequent conveyance or transaction involving the subject lands. The solicitor for the applicant is to provide an undertaking whereby they inform the committee in writing that the lands are being conveyed to an abutting property owner and thus a merger of title will take place, which merger shall include all interests held inclusive or mortgagee's interest. A copy of the reference plan to be provided to the municipality of Central Elgin, and a drainage reassessment be done if necessary at the owner's expense.
All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. CEP 2523, application to amend the municipality of Central Elgin official plan. And if I could get a mover and a seconder. Councillor Connors, Councillor Bachman, thank you.
Mayor Sloan, the motion reads, moved by Councillor Connors, seconded by Councillor Bachman, that report CEP 2523 be received, and that direction be given by council to prepare site-specific draft amendments to the municipality of Central Elgin official plan and the Township of Yarmouth zoning bylaw for the proposed rural wedding event venue uses at 5277 Quaker Road, which may be legally described as Concession 2, North Part Lot 21, Municipality of Central Elgin. And further, that a date for a public meeting be established in accordance with Ontario Regulations 54306 and 54506 as amended.
Question, Councillor Halpin?
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor. When I read this file, I felt like a lot of it made good sense. For example, the property can't technically have something that's additional to agriculture because it's not agricultural, but because of its size, it's not capable of doing agricultural activity. So it made good sense to consider making changes in spite of that. The big thing that really caught me here was that the health unit needs potable water on site. And right now, this site is asking caterers and so forth to bring potable water with them to provide. And I'd like to ask staff some more questions about that. When I looked at it, the nearest source of municipal water would be Dexter Line, which is about 1.2 kilometers away. So I'm sure there'd be some financial burden in connecting. I don't know whether they've considered expanding their septic or their well systems to support, but my concerns would be that you can very easily plan for as much as you need for cooking, for example, but as soon as you have an accident and someone says run water on it until the ambulance gets there, all of a sudden not having water sufficient for things is a huge problem, right? So, so through you to staff, has there been any conversation about connecting to municipal water or about expansion of well services?
Mr. McClure, please.
Thank you, Mayor Sloan, through you to Councillor Halpin. Yes, there have been several discussions with the applicant on opportunities to provide private services, which are permitted and required for development and growth within the agricultural area, the official plan policies in that support the development on there. But that's something that the applicant has continually advanced, that they would rely on caterers, et cetera, to bring in services. I think while the report is long, I think it should be noted that staff has been generally supportive of the proposed use, subject to the appropriate services being provided, and that they can accommodate the use on the property. But again, that's something that the policies, the health unit, the province through the provincial policy statement, and confirmation through the ministry of the environment, that what they're proposing would not meet the requirements as set out by the province, the county, and the municipality in this instance.
Thank you, Mr. McClure.
Thank you. Further questions or comments? All those in favor? Councillor Graham?
Sorry, just the wording of it was a bit odd. So all those in favor of approving it? Is that what you're asking?
Yes. All those in favor of approving this? Opposed? Carried. Okay, thank you. Next is from the Chief Administrative Officer, CAO 0923, Council Proceedings. Mr. Graves.
Thank you, Your Worship. The intent of this was just more of an information report, and I thought it would be a good idea if council had a quick summary sheet so that they could go to when we're talking about different types of motions that are on the table, etc. And unless members have any questions for me, I just leave it with you as information. I think you'd be helpful if you kept it handy as you move through your council business from meeting to meeting, and then it's always something you can refer back to.
Thank you, Mr. Graves. Questions or comments? Moving forward, DFS 1223, request for, I'm on the wrong where. CAO 1023, corporate activities. I'm going to need a mover and a seconder for CAO 0923. I apologize. Yes. Thank you. Did you move it, Councillor Halpin? Okay, thank you. Deputy Mayor Noble. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. CAO 1023, Mr. Graves, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Again, this is a bit of an information report, but perhaps some direction, a little bit of discussion on the first item. And I think I've talked with most members around the council table that it seems prudent that it would be helpful to schedule some additional sessions to talk about some specific topics that council is dealing with. And these would not be types of sessions where there'd be motions to move business forward, but more of a workshop to allow administration to explain various items that and maybe go into a little more depth about different files that that will come in front of you. I just use the first one as an example, and forgive me, I've just picked these examples. I'm not sure how in depth the council has had relative to the municipality's emergency plan. For example, if a tornado came through this area sometime this summer or fall, what is council's responsibilities and how does that whole plan fit together and who does what kind of thing? And I think for a 20-minute or half an hour session focusing on some of those things, and I've listed a few others that we could probably produce a long list. But the real thing is, I guess, is council interested in this type of info sessions and sort of discussions? And then how would you like them structured in terms of timing? We could introduce a topic at each regular council session if that doesn't stretch out your meetings too long, or we could look to do special sessions and schedule a couple of extra nights during the month to cover some of these topics. But so I was looking for some direction and if council was interested in moving forward on that.
Thank you, Mr. Graves. What are the thoughts of council? Councillor Bachman, please.
I'm in favor of anything that's going to inform and enlighten us on any issues moving forward. I don't think you can have enough information when making decisions that are affecting our municipality. Having said that, I'd like to consider expanding even those suggestions that when our staff has major projects coming forward, that perhaps we can arrange site visits as a group. And then have the staff actually go through what is and walk around the site and actually see it. Having been involved with some conservation authority projects in the past, one of their practices was that they would take their board a bus tour. Now they have a larger association than we do, but they would bus tour them out to the sites, introduce them to all the projects that are going on over this certain time frame, and then when the project's complete, take them back and show them what was completed, and then further carry on from there with new business. I think it's in our best interest to have as much information as we can and to actually see what we're making decisions on and have our staff explaining what it is needs to be done so that we can have that firsthand information.
Thank you, Councillor Bachman. Other councillors have any questions or comments? Deputy Mayor Noble.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I agree with Councillor Bachman, and with other projects that we have going on, if we could get some updates once in a while on those, just when people reach out to us to let us know where we're at with certain projects. I know we got a bunch going on now that we passed the budget, and I find updates would be beneficial, maybe with some pictures. I find that a little easier to understand sometimes when, other than the long-winded technical versions.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? So I think the direction Mr. Graves might be to, I don't know, perhaps the will of council, we could have an information session starting at the next council meeting and generally, and then perhaps some more information to Councillor Bachman and Deputy Mayor Noble's point on how to come up with an idea for a plan for some tours and perhaps some more updates on the major projects we face.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So we'll plan on we try and keep a file within sort of a 20-minute discussion period. The director who's directly responsible for that file would prepare 3 or 4 slides. And I'd really encourage you to be open for discussion. Like, it's a discussion time. It's not like you can be passing a motion or anything, just really open for discussion so you really understand what's being presented to you. So we'll plan that and we'll move forward, and we can be flexible. We can change it around a little bit. And if you have some topics that of interest, we can ask that each time we have one of these. Say, okay, do you want to add something to the list or something current? And then we'll just keep introducing those things as time moves on. So, okay.
Thank you. Questions or comments? If I could get a mover and a seconder. Councillor Bachman, Councillor Halpin.
Mayor Sloan, the motion reads, moved by Councillor Bachman, seconded by Councillor Halpin, that report CAO 1023 regarding corporate activities be received for information, and that additional council information sessions be added to regular meetings of council going forward. Does that sound agreeable?
Yes.
And further, that staff be directed to return with further information regarding council site visits and project updates at the next regular meeting of council.
Thank you. All those in favor? Opposed and carried. Moving along, we are now at the Director of Financial Services Treasury Report, DFS 1123, request for proposals 2023-19 consultation selection, Westport Stanley Stormwater Management. Our staff wishing to speak to this?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I have nothing to add to the report, but happy to answer any questions.
Councillor Graham, questions or comments?
I would like, through you, Mr. Mayor, I'd like staff to kind of review with us what it doesn't seem to be on this report, so what the original depth is, why we tendered for that depth, why we're requesting a 15%, what depth that'll take us to, and what are the implications, both negative and positive on that.
Thank you. Mr. Brooks.
I believe the counselor's question may have been directed towards item number 2, the Port Stanley Harbor dredging. Is that correct?
Well, DFS 1123, request for proposals is consultation selection, Westport Stanley Stormwater Management.
Sorry, I thought we were DFS 1023, request for tender Port Stanley Harbor dredging.
No, we're the one before it, aren't we? Okay. Oh, sorry about that. Counselor Watson, please.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Mr. Brooks. I see we used a process called the 2 envelope process. Couple questions here. How many times do we use that? And I know we go on a point system there, but what was that tender of IBI Group Professional Services? What was their tendered amount for this job? Just thought I'd ask. Thanks.
Mr. Brooks, please.
The fee for IBI for this project is $250,319. And for proposals such as this, for the award of consulting services, typically a 2 envelope process is used. That gives staff the ability to evaluate the technical criteria of the project. And so we can evaluate that separately from the price. So you give a score for the technical merits of the project, and then you evaluate the prices, and you combine that to get a final score. It just so happens that IBI submitted the lowest price on this project, and they were awarded the project.
Thank you. Counselor Connors, please.
Through you, Mayor Sloan. Mr. Brooks, can you divulge the other prices and other scores? I mean, was it close? Was there a span or?
There were 3 proposals that were fairly close. IBI, I don't have the scores in front of me, but IBI scored strongly in both technical, and of course they did have the lowest price as well. So there were a number of solid submissions on this project.
Thank you. Mr. Brooks, Counselor Graham.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Mr. Brooks, do you know what the highest bid number was?
I don't have the numbers in front of me, but I believe it was north of 400,000.
Counselor Watson, please.
Yes, thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Mr. Brooks. How many of these do we do a year? Because I see we actually have a procurement and risk management analyst. So do they do other jobs as well? Because if we're not doing a whole lot of these every year, are we getting good value there? Thanks.
Thank you, Counselor Watson. Mr. Brooks, please.
The procurement and risk management coordinator reports to Archana, so I'll defer to her on this.
Thank you, Mr. Brooks.
Thank you, Jeff. And through you, Mr. Mayor, not only this, the coordinator role also involves all kinds of submissions and procurements. And I just want to mention, like, one of the tenders like this takes about 30 days, and there's a lot of prep work and everything. I'm pretty sure all of you guys who have been on these proposals and developing these proposals, they do not happen overnight. So there is a lot of work that goes in collaboration with 2 other directors, which is from infrastructure, as well as coordination with vendors and all kinds of stuff. So and also this is just not one kind of procurement. The other procurements, like corporate procurements, are also part of his job. And the insurance is also taken care of by this same role, and also the risk management of the overall municipal sector. Hope that
Thank-
helps
you.
you understand the role.
Mr. Brooks?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, just to get back to Councillor Graham's question, the highest submitted price was $349,740.
Thank you, Mr. Brooks. Any other questions or comments? Councillor Watson, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, through you. Thank you very much, Archana. That understanding, that really helps me out a lot. I appreciate it. Thanks.
No worries. Thank you.
If I could get a mover and a seconder. Councillor Watson, Councillor Bachman.
Mayor Sloan, the motion reads, moved by Councillor Watson, seconded by Councillor Bachman, that report DFS 1123 regarding request for proposals 2023-19 consultation selection, Westport Stanley Stormwater Management be received for information, and that council accept the proposal from IBI Group Professional Services Canada, Inc. for 2023-19 consultant selection, Westport Stanley Stormwater Management in the amount of $245,989.71 plus all applicable taxes.
All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. DFS 1223, request for tender, Port Stanley Harbor dredging. Staff want to comment, Mr. Perrin, please?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll speak to this. This was a joint report with Mr. Dooling and myself. Added a fair bit to the report to give some context to the actual work, as well as for council's consideration to extend the contract. And I'll try to address Councillor Graham's questions earlier. So this procurement is in fact a tender. It's not the 2-envelope process. So it's not a proposal call. It's an actual tender where we know the exact scope of work that's required, and we are able to define that into a tender and have contractors bid on that based on, in this case, a lump sum for a certain component, and then a unit price contract for to undertake the majority of the work. So this was a tender. It was advertised on bids and tenders. And advertised on the municipal website. There were 4 contractors that closed the tender, and those results are identified in the staff report. The low bid from Dean Construction Company Limited from LaSalle was $2.744 million, and the high was McNally Construction Inc. At 4.6. So staff are of the opinion that we received very competitive prices and very good prices when we compare the unit prices in this tender to what's been experienced in the marketplace over the last 2 years throughout Ontario. The contract does allow for an extension of the contract amounts or quantities by 15% without any adjustment to the unit prices. The unit price that was received for the actual dredging operation is $22.21 a cubic meter. And that dredging depth with respect to chart datum is approximately 5.5 meters below chart datum. We can remove additional material and there would be a benefit to that because the reason we're dredging is not for navigation, but it's for flood control. And the dredging operation downstream of the lift bridge does have an impact on flood levels upstream. We know that through modeling and the studies that have been undertaken over a number of decades. So there is a benefit that in staff's position and also commenting and questioning Mr. Riggs that given the very competitive unit prices that we've received, that there would be an advantage to the municipality to extend the contract by 15%, dredge more material. And what that will do, it will spread out the return frequency for the major dredging again. We won't have to come in 6 to 7 years. We can probably extend out to 8.5, 9 years before we have to do the major dredge again. When you look at item number 1 in the tender, and that's the site preparation, that's we'll say the overhead cost, the cost to mobilize the equipment from the contractor's home harbor to the site, bonding that's required as part of the contract for performance to ensure performance, insurance costs, lodging for the contractor's staff, those types of things. So those are somewhat fixed costs that we can defer. By deferring the contract, we won't have to pay those as soon. So as a result, we believe there is a benefit to extend the contract by 15%. We have had an initial meeting with the contractor and suggested to them that staff would be recommending that to council. They know they don't really have much to say about it if we choose to do that. One thing that we are investigating is to be able to start the contract sooner than anticipated. The fisheries window says that no in-water works can occur prior to July 1st. We've actually reached out to Department of Fisheries and Oceans and Ministry of Natural Resources, the approval authority, to gain approval to start the contract 2 weeks early. That fisheries window is dictated by the species of fish in the body of water, and we're relatively comfortable that there would be no adverse effect on the fisheries. So subject to their approval, we could start June 15th, and the contractor is anticipating 24-hour operations Monday to Friday. In the event of inclement weather during the work week, so inclement weather isn't rain, it's high winds out of the south, which creates unfavorable lake conditions for the disposal operation, they would have to shut down. So depending on schedule, they may end up working weekends to make up that time if they get behind. But the intent is to have all the work done in the 2023 calendar year.
Thank you, Mr. Perrin. A quick question. Have we dealt with this group before, Dean Construction?
The municipality of Central Elgin has not dealt with Dean Construction. However, Riggs Engineering has dealt with them on a number of projects, and no concerns with respect to the quality of their work, their professionalism.
No, just curious. And when was the last dredging of the harbor?
Last dredging was in 2016.
Okay, thank you. Questions or comments? And the last one I had just before I go to, how many extra days will this add the potential of 15%? Because I don't know that it's confirmed of the 15% extra. How many days would that add to the project, please?
If ideally, if we can get being able to start earlier to June 15th, we can accommodate the 15% in those 15 days. It's not a direct relation. It's when you are able to start the work, because as you can appreciate, being a resident of Port Stanley, is that the fall is when we get the inclement weather with respect to southwest winds, which creates unfavorable lake conditions for the disposal. So this, ideal is, June, July, August into September. Once we get into October, November, that's when we start getting those southwest winds and the unfavorable lake conditions.
Thank you very much. Questions and comments from council, please. Councillor Bachman.
Thank you, Mr. Perrin. Through you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Perrin, you mentioned that a lot of the companies are already working close by. Are these guys one of those units that's working close by?
Yeah, those Dean Construction, and they were in close proximity to Port Stanley, as well as McNally, I believe.
Thank you, Mr. Perrin. Councillor Cram, please.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Mr. Perrin. So if you could let me know what the original depth was that we were foreseeing with the original amount of dredging, and then what additional depth we're looking at for the 15% increase in dredging, and as well, if you know the 2016 depth that we went to, because that would be 7 years ago.
Thank you, Mr. Perrin.
I believe earlier I stated the original depth was 5.5 meters below chart datum. So the depth will not increase substantially. We would actually increase the channel width beyond what is anticipated to create the volume. So it's not that we're we're not creating a deeper channel. The intent is to take out volume of sediment within the bathtub, we'll say, if you think of it that way. The more volume we can take of sediment out, the more end area or volume that can be deposited from sedimentation from upstream and Kettle Creek. So it's not the intent to dredge to great huge depths. We can dredge wider within that channel.
Thank you, Mr. Perrin. Councillor Graham, follow up.
And do you know the depth that it was dredged in 2025, 26?
Yeah, 2016, it was 4.5 meters below chart datum. And that volume actually was not the same because all the work was excavated from shore. So there was areas of the channel that we could not get reach in the center of the channel.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor Noble, please.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, that extra 15% that we're talking about, is it possible to negotiate a lower rate to get that extra 15? No, okay. And
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So the reason we're recommending the 15% is the CCDC contract. So it's a standard contract in Canada for construction work, allows a 15% either increase or decrease in unit costs without either of the parties, the owner or the contractor, being able to negotiate. So if it was, more than 15% deviation, then one of the parties would have an opportunity to come back and negotiate a different price. I would submit that based on the unit prices that we see here, we're not going to get it lower.
Thank you, Mr. Perrin. When we do have the prices, and just as I learn about how these tenders work, the 2.7, that's also, you build in an overage for that, do you? A potential what percentage you put in for over cost, please?
Yeah, so the 2.744 million does not include a contingency allowance because just by the nature of the contract, we're digging out dirt, right? So when you scroll down to excuse me, page 3 of 5 of the report, you'll see that there is a summary table there. So the construction contract, and there's that amount. And then on top of that is the contingency allowance, and then engineering and project management subtotals and our applicable net HST. The municipality pays 1.76% of HST. So the total contract cost is 3.395 million. That's if council decides to extend the contract by the 15%. So that's the cost that we're anticipating. The contingency of $100,000, we don't anticipate we'll need that. But for the purposes of setting the picture out for council about how the project would be funded from the applicable reserve accounts, we thought it was prudent that council consider $100,000 of contingency. So there's potentially no surprises on the impact to the reserves that will fund this project. And then when you go down further in the report, the 2023 budget contemplated 4.5 million for the overall project costs. And, with the 15%, we're suggesting it's approximately 3.4 million. So approximately a $1.1 million savings below the budgeted amount. And then the final table on page 3 of 5 outlines how that 3.395 million would be funded. So currently the Harbor Reserve account has 2,078,000 approximately in it. That's the unaudited balance within that account as of end of December 2022. So the remaining 1.317 million would staff are recommending to be funded from the working capital reserve.
Thank you, Mr. Barron. Questions or comments? Councillor Connors, please.
Through you, Mayor. I got a couple of questions, so I'm just going to kind of rattle them off, and I'm going to direct most of them towards Lloyd. So, Mr. Perrin, is there any extra cost for weather In other words, if they run into the inclement weather, do we get dinged for that, or is it an all-inclusive cost? I figured that much. And what about, you also talked about dredging every year in previous times, and we talked about that and how it would push out the major dredging years down the road. So I'd like you to comment on that compared to this also. And these four prices that we received, I mean, it looks to me, and you talked about this when you were talking about the tender, you had indicated that if they could work on a 24-hour basis, we could save quite a bit of money. So I'm assuming some of these guys are gonna propose to work on a 24-hour basis where maybe one of them didn't. Is that why the spread is there?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, through you, Mayor Sloan, to Councillor Connor. So the answer to your first question was with respect to would the municipality be exposed to additional costs due to inclement weather? No. The prices per cubic meter, and if inclement weather happens and they end up with unusual number of inclement weather days, these people are marine contractors. They pretty much understand how many inclement weather days they're going to get, you know, on each month. For example, they take those into account. Weather's weather, you know, things change, but with respect to the contract, we would not be exposed to additional costs as a result of weather. With respect to why the fourth contractor was higher, there's some, we haven't talked to them, but there's some speculation why they're higher. But that's not because they bid, you know, 12-hour days versus 24. We believe that everyone was considering the 24-hour work days.
Can you also speak to the dredging per year versus?
Sorry, so with respect to the plan about annual maintenance dredging, that would be even at $22 a cubic meter, we're probably not able to even hit that from the on land maintenance dredging, because we'll have disposal costs depending on what that works out to, you know, where we can take that material, because I think staff have spoke to it before, but the province of Ontario through the Ministry of Environment has come up with excess soils legislation. So any soil is considered a hazardous waste now. So it has to be, and we're seeing that in contracts like Front Street and all our projects where there is an increased level of testing that has to be undertaken on those soils, and documentation of where those soils are gone, have been disposed of. Gone are the days, and I've been doing this a long time, where, you know, you have excess soil and you talk to a local farmer or somebody, and you know, I've got a low spot in the back field, and they just load the trucks up and take it there. Those days are few and far between now with the amount of testing that has to happen on excess soil. So that's still an option that the municipality should be considering going forward. But we still don't believe we're going to probably get to the $22 a cubic meter like what we're seeing here. This $22 a cubic meter, we paid over $30 in 2016.
So if I'm getting it right, I mean, you do recommend doing the yearly dredge anyways, even though we're going to pay a higher price per cubic foot, because it'll push out the major dredging further down the road?
Through you, Mayor Sloan, to Councillor Connors, that's correct, because while we're looking at $22 a cubic meter, we also have $749,000 in this tender. Sorry, we'll say $790,000 in this item number one, which is your overhead, right? So we believe that, yes, extend 15%, but going forward, we should still consider that annual maintenance dredging land-based.
Just one final comment for me. This is more of what I'd like to see when we put a tender out, and you know, it's got nothing to do with any of us here, but there's a nice spread here from 2.7 million to 4.6 million. Our budget was 4.5. it's much different than the last tender we discussed. And it's what I look for in a tender. Some people are hungry, some people aren't, and I understand that.
Thank you, Councillor Connors. Other councillors, please. Councillor, Deputy Mayor Noble. Sorry, did you have your hand up?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the annual dredging that we're talking about, Mr. Perrin, estimated cost on that if we were to do that next year?
Mr. Perrin, please.
Through you, Mayor Sloan to Deputy Mayor Noble, you may not, I would recommend you don't do that next year. Like, by the time we're done, we're going to be into the fall anyway, this project. So, or the municipality should consider the annual maintenance dredging starting in 2025. Order of magnitude should be budgeting probably $150,000 to $200,000 to do that annual maintenance dredging.
Just so, if I may, so we're on the same page, and we haven't done any annual maintenance dredging since 2016. Is that correct?
Yeah, in 2016, it wasn't maintenance dredging. It was like similar to this, but it was all land-based operations. So equipment was confined to the east and west pier. There was a minor amount that was dredged via a barge, excavator on a barge that was then swung, loaded onto trucks and disposed of in the Hoffus Park containment site cell. So Hoffus Park, when you look at that now, that was the actual disposal site for the 2016 dredge.
Thank you. Councillor Graham, please.
So just to clarify, the only potential benefit to spending an additional almost $290,000 would be the possibility that it would delay the next big dredge, but without any guarantee. Is that correct?
Mr. Perrin.
The staff are recommending it because the unit price that we just received on this tender is substantially lower than what we paid in 2016. We paid over $30 a cubic meter in 2016. So, you can put in, May or whatever. It's up to council. If council wishes to not extend the contract, that's entirely your prerogative. Professionally, staff and the marine engineer that's managing this project are saying that it's a financial benefit to this municipality in the long term to extend this contract by 15%.
Thank you. And on that, and a financial benefit to them as well. I guess what I'm worried about is that we had a tender which we put out requesting for a certain depth. It came back and now there's something extra. So for me, it's a practical. Do we need to dredge the harbor? We were told we did. We put through a tender and now something's different has come only, if I may, because it's less than we thought it would be. I don't have the ability to understand whether an extra $289,000 is going to benefit us in the long run when we're already talking about dredging for maintenance next year, which I didn't know about. So thank you, Councillor Connors. So that's my concern, Mr. Perrin, and that's how I feel. I just make that aware to council. Councillor Bachman, please.
I'm trying to take this approach from, we budgeted 4.5. We're down to 2.7 plus the 15%. Even with the 15%, we're expanding, as Mr. Perrin put, the bathtub size, which logically would assume that it'll take more as time goes on. If we can delay 2 years from having to do this again, it's a penny now or a pound later, right? So I'm more for doing things right the first time than having to come back and do it sooner than later.
Thank you, Councillor Bachman. I thought that the original tender was exactly what we had asked for. I didn't think that coming back at a different price would change the parameters. So, excuse me, Mr. Perrin.
To you, Mr. Mayor. So just a point of clarification. So the tender has the price and the tender scope did not change, throughout the tender process. What staff are recommending is based on the unit prices received, that council increase the scope. So we're proposing that you award to Dean Construction, who is the low bidder, based on the comparing apples to apples through the tender process, that they conform to the tender like the other three proponents. And that based on the unit prices, staff are recommending that council consider extending the contract by 15%, the quantity by 15% of what's excavated, because there would be a financial benefit to the municipality long-term based on the unit price that you received.
And just to follow that up, it was down from the last time, Mr. Perrin, is that correct? It was $30, now it's 20. So who's to say that it's not going down in 2 years from now?
I'm not going to say that, but if you recall, when staff brought the report the first time, seeking direction to tender the project, we informed council that based on our knowledge and the proximity of contractors in the area, because we're not talking about someone that's just, a municipality over or in London. We're talking about, a limited number of contractors on the Great Lakes that do work. We recommended to council that you go to tender when we brought the report the first time because of market conditions and the proximity of contractors to Port Stanley. In 7 years or 6 years, whenever you want to dredge it again, or there's a need to dredge, you may not be afforded that same opportunity. You may have contractors that have work tied up for the next 2 years and may not be anywhere near Lake Ontario or Lake Erie or Port Stanley for that matter.
Thank you. Mr. Councillor Connors, please.
Through you, Mayor Sloan. So we're down roughly $8 a cubic yard or a cubic meter, which is a positive thing. And what I'd like to clarify, did we, in the last tender in 2016, were you able to get the contractor to work the 24-hour cycle like you're getting him to work here? Because I believe this is where we're saving money. Is that, am I right? Or
Councillor, Mr. Perrin, please.
You will never hear that in front of my name. With respect to the work in 2016, they did not work 24 hours. It was a different operation in the fact that it was land-based. So you had, we were loading material on rock trucks, 6-wheeled dump trucks that you would see in a pit or a quarry, and transporting it to the dump site. It just by its nature, you were confined by your production rates based on transportation costs. We don't have that situation now.
Thank you. Questions or comments further? Chief. Oh, okay.
Mr. Mayor, I do have a comment, if you allow.
Please.
I just wanted to assure the council that going forward, you will see all the spreads in every tender report that would come through.
Thank you for that.
Thank you. Thanks.
Any further questions? Mr. Perrin and then Mr. Perrin.
Yeah, sorry. One more thing, and I maybe I wasn't clear on it in previous comments, but the other thing that's the unknown, Mr. Mayor, you commented we could see a lower price in 6 years or 2 years or whatever. But the other thing that we don't control is what legislation says with respect to these projects. If you asked us back even 3 years ago, would we be impacted on capital construction projects by a provincial regulation called excess soils regulation, where we had to do increased sampling and testing, we wouldn't have been able to speak to that. So we don't always make the rules, and we don't always know what the rules are going to be a year from now or 3 years from now. And those changes in rules can impact our construction projects and our costs. Right now, we know we have in-lake disposal, which we may not get in 6 years' time. It's getting harder and harder to dump in lake. And we may not, if we can't dump in lake, then we may have to do on land disposal. Excess soils kicks in and you'll have to do increased sampling and testing. So
hard to predict the future. Councillor Halpin, please.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor Sloan. This strikes me as partly good fortune and partly strategic win that we bid at a time when we had more people capable of bidding on it than what might otherwise have been. And it happens that we've been able to get these prices. And if we can stay underneath of the budget that we had set aside for this and then still defer future costs that would go onto the tax burden in future years for the public, that seems like a win all around.
Thank you, Councillor Halpin. Councillor Graham, please. And then, sorry, Councillor Watson after Councillor Graham.
Want to go first?
I think that for the amount of 288,000, we had already submitted what the tender with all the specifications. You know, we're saying it may be this or it may be that. It may help us down the road. It may not, but we have no way of knowing that one way or another. We submitted or we called for tenders with a specific amount of or with specs that our staff had recommended to us. So I think that we should be going with that rather than adding an additional $288,000, because again, we have to look at that as our taxpayers' money. So we need to be very careful with that spending.
Thank you, Councillor Watson.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Mayor. Lloyd, thanks for your hard work on this project and the money savings. That's awesome. And I think we have to realize, people, that when you got to use some logic and common sense here. When you see a deal, you got to jump on it. They're not there forever. And this is a good deal. When we can get that much more done for that amount of money, you take it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Watson. Councillor Connor, sorry, Councillor Halpin, you were first, then Councillor Connor.
Oh, sorry.
Thank you.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor Sloan. I just wanted to contribute in response to Councillor Graham's statement that the tender that we put out in the first place was based on the recommendation of our staff, as she's said. And now our staff has come back and said that an opportunity has arisen that they recommend is even better and would even better move forward the needs of our community. So if we're going to trust them in the first place on what to put out for tender, and now they're telling us that an even better advantage for the community exists, I'd like us to trust them. I'd like us to work with that.
Thank you, Councillor Connors.
Through you, Mayor Sloan, to Archana. During our budget deliberations, we gave up about $450,000 or thereabouts out of reserve. Now we have an opportunity to pick up 1.1 million in reserve. So does that offset, and are we ahead by 600,000?
That is correct.
Questions or comments, folks? Anyone else? I'll need a mover and a seconder.
What are we moving in second? Are we moving on the 15% or the not 15%?
Well, it's right there, and the
Okay.
council accept the tender from
With the 15%?
Dean Construction Limited for 2023 in the amount of $3,033,662. It was before 2,744. So
Okay.
it has the new amount.
Great, thank you.
Did you have a question or were you? Oh,
Just a question.
Councillor Graham.
Sorry, so just for the procedurally, so we would vote on the motion that is currently including the 15%. And if we deny that or turn that down, then we'd move on the question of just the original tender. Is that correct?
Exactly.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mover and a seconder, Councillor Bachman, Councillor Watson.
Mayor Sloan, the motion reads, moved by Councillor Bogman, seconded by Councillor Watson, that report DFS 1223 regarding request for tender 2023-04 Port Stanley Harbor dredging be received for information, and that council accept the tender from Dean Construction Company Limited for 2023-04 Port Stanley Harbor dredging in the amount of $3,033,662 plus all applicable taxes.
All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Moving on. Director of Asset Management Development Service, AMDS 1823, application for exemption to the noise bylaw number 212 is amended. If I could get a mover and a seconder. Councillor Halpin, Councillor Bachman.
Mayor Sloan, the motion reads, moved by Councillor Halpin, seconded by Councillor Bogman, that report AMDS 1823 regarding application for exemption to noise bylaw 212 as amended be received for information, and that council grant an exemption to bylaw number 212, being a bylaw to control noise in the municipality of Central Elgin as amended to allow the St. Thomas Dragway to host a concert as part of a weekend program taking place on May 20th, 2023 from 7:00 p.m. to 10:30 p.m.
Questions or comments? All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. AMDS 2323, Barnacles Beer House and Eatery. If I could get if I first of all, for discussion, I think there's been some, I saw the update here. Mr. Perrin, did you want to speak to this, sir?
Just to confirm that staff did do a title search, so the property is all in one ownership. There is split zoning on the property as identified in the figure in staff's report. There is with respect to the patio area and the bar and restaurant area, that as a commercial or business zone on it. The remainder of the property is zoned residential. The request to extend the the patio to the west would be onto property that's zoned for residential purposes, and as a result would not permit a patio extension. It would, if there was a patio extension contemplated, the landowner would have to undertake a zoning amendment, a planning approval to extend the commercial zone onto the residential property. And with that, it would make the on-site parking for the residential use further deficient. So there's 4 units in this house now. Under the zoning bylaw, it requires 1.5 parking spaces per unit. So based on the residential use on the property right now, it would require 6 parking spaces rather. Currently, there's only 3 parking spaces that are provided on site for the residential use, and to extend the patio to the west and with new zoning, business zoning, it would take away 2 of those 3 parking spots, leaving only 1 parking spot on the property that could be used for residential purposes. So further exacerbating the deficiency in the on-site parking.
Just to confirm that it was exacerbated. How many years has it been like this before? Has it been 2 or 3? 2? Okay. So for the last 2 years, this is just, we're looking for a continuation. You're saying a zoning amendment is required. Any questions or comments, Councillor Graham?
So if there's paperwork that has to be filled out for them to apply for that, I can understand that for sure. I would like to propose that we extend their temporary approval to have that as their patio, whether we charge them cash in lieu as we have that policy for the parking, and then that would give them time over the course of the spring, summer, fall to get in their paperwork for the following years after this. But I would propose that we look at a temporary approval like we've had in the past 2 years, I believe, for the COVID approval as well.
Thank you, Councillor Graham. Mr. Perrin, please.
Through you, Mayor Sloan. So the temporary patio extensions was site specific, or was specific based on COVID with Alcohol and Gaming Commission through the Liquor Licensing Act. That temporary period is now expired. COVID's no longer a state of emergency or declared a pandemic. So as a result, the rules go back to the way they previously were. So the municipality would not have the ability to approve the patio extension onto lands that are not zoned for business uses. With respect to the cash in lieu of parking, staff provided the cash in lieu of parking bylaw, I believe, attached to this report, and the cash in lieu of parking only applies to commercial uses. So if a commercial use, through redevelopment, is has substandard parking on site, then there is the ability to have council consider cash in lieu of parking. What we're saying is that by extending the patio use on residential zone property, that same opportunity is not afforded to the applicant or council, because the cash in lieu of parking only applies to the commercial use. It doesn't apply to residential.
Mr. Perrin, does the Alcohol and Gaming Commission supersede the municipality with its authority?
The Alcohol and Gaming Commission requires the municipality to approve, but the municipality would have to approve based on what the use of the property is.
Thank you. So we approved it during COVID, just to confirm?
It didn't require approval during COVID because the Alcohol and Gaming Commission allowed these types of expanded uses.
Thank you. Mr. McClure, please.
Thank you, Mayor Sloan. And further to the discussions that's being had right now, ultimately, any sort of variance zoning would be required to apply the rules and policies of the day. So based on that, and if that's the will of council, we would have to go through that process. But as Mr. Perrin has indicated, there would be significant hurdles to I guess advancing that type of application on this site.
Thank you. Councillor Bachman, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Although I do strongly empathize with the business and their ability to expand their service area, I'm on the fence, honestly, with what direction to go on this, because understanding the parking issues we do have down in that area, this is taking away 3, 4, 5. I realize 6 is what the residential zoning is. Spots. So I don't know, Mr. Perrin, where do they park now? Like, if they've got residents of 4, where are they parking?
They're already parking on the street, on-street parking, which we know is problematic in certain times of the year, that there isn't sufficient on-street parking.
Understood. And just to confirm, it's a two-car laneway. So the laneway is here and the patio went into the laneway during COVID. Okay, I just wanted to confirm. And I'm with you, Councillor Bachman, that we empathize with the business owner that wants to bring, provide value and run a business in Port Stanley, was given the opportunity to during some obviously some different times with COVID, but it's a difficult one as I agree with you. Councillor Connors, sorry.
Through you, Mayor Sloan, to Mr. McClure. You indicated you would have to jump through or jump over some hurdles. What kind of hurdles are we facing here? I tend to side with the building owner, but I want to know what our exposure is, what our liability is to jump through these hurdles.
Sir.
Through you, Mayor Sloan, to Councillor Connors. We would have to sit down with the landowner to review the application to see what the impacts are. Ultimately, there's certain land use designations on place that policies apply. But what I'm seeing in the application, I mean, in the report, is ultimately there would be not only impacts of removal of required parking, loading, et cetera, for the business itself, but adjacent impacts on the ability for the residential use to have or provide the required parking that's needed for that property itself. So ultimately, we can go through the process to see what those overall impacts are or would be. But again, I would suggest that that what I'm seeing here, there would be potential concerns.
Councillor Bachman, please.
Follow-up question. Is this a rental unit or is this a private residence? And only because I'm thinking that if it comes down to that parking issue and it is a rental or even private, if they leave to go get groceries or whatever, they come back, that spot may not be there. They could be parking 6 blocks away. Whereas if they had that residential parking, they just pull in and they're all set. So there's a convenience aspect here to the people that are actually living or renting that space as well.
And on that, Councillor Connor, the bar and the house. What did I say? Oh, geez, I thought I made a big boo-boo. God, I'm calling people council that don't want to be on council. I'm getting names wrong. The house is owned by on the same lot as the restaurant. So it's, I don't know how it goes, but there's a lane in between. So it's an interesting one. Sorry. Did anyone else have Mr. Perrin?
Thank you. To you, Mr. Mayor. So in addition to what Mr. McClure had stated, you know, yes, there's hurdles, but in the interest of transparency and accountability, planning approvals are a public process. And we just had 5 or 6 public meetings this evening where the public was afforded an opportunity to comment on a zoning or a minor variance. So that's what we're saying, is that, you know, staff are saying that, yes, they would need a plan approval. We're going to take in, as staff, we're obligated professionally to comment based on, you know, the policies within the official plan and the zoning bylaw. Council can take that or leave it, but also the public would have an opportunity to comment as well and potentially appeal whatever decision that, you know, any council would make.
Thanks, Mr. Perrin. I think the question comes down to is that it was given an exemption during COVID. So people had it for 2 years. It was there. The business started to rely on it. I know that there wasn't any public consultation likely when that happened. Councillor Halpin, please.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor Sloan. It seems like there is an avenue by which they can ultimately get this done if they'd like to. And I'm sympathetic to the business's wants and to the fact that they own both properties. So I understand why they feel that they should be able to sort of shift the designation back and forth, but it does impact the neighborhood. And if you put additional parking stress on the road, that does affect any neighbor that wants to have guests over or wants to use the street in any way. So I think there's value in doing it the right way so that any neighbors that do have concerns about it can come in here and talk to us about it and address that.
Thank you. Councillor Graham, please.
Again, I think that there's a way that we can give them a temporary, because they've done it for 2 years, that parking's been missing for 2 years. It's 2 spots, I believe. I mean, there's a spot further up that could be removed and put 2 spots of parking there where there's a seating area there. But again, there haven't been any parking issues to my understanding from the last 2 years when it has been used as a patio. So I don't foresee that there's going to be any big issue moving forward with the parking. And again, this could really impact their business since they've built up their business. They've been using that patio for 2 years. I still think that we should be able to give them a temporary approval for this and then give them the time, obviously, to go through the many hurdles that Mr. McClure has talked about.
Thank you, Councillor Graham. Any comments from staff? Mr. McClure, please.
Thank you, Mayor Sloan. Just as a follow-up, I believe that the legislation that you're referring to was a provincial initiative that superseded the Planning Act in that time of COVID. So that's why, given the fact that there was a specific exemption by the province to allow for these things to occur on the ground, given the difficult situations at the time, that's now since been repealed. So that's why there's processes in place to ensure that the zoning that's in place and that there's processes to alter or amend that, which we would have to go through the applicant if that's something that they're looking to do.
Understood. Thank you, Mr. McClure. Councillor Bachman, please.
Just testing my memory here, but at that time when that policy was put in by the government, I believe there had to be like a 6-foot distance between tables and chairs, and possibly that expanding size made that difference. But now that we've shrunk that down to where you can be this close, that shouldn't drastically affect the number of seats they're putting in. Now they're looking at expanding even further. If you understand the whole space and table configurations, right? So by making the space larger, you're putting in more tables as opposed to the legislation we had 2 years ago, which said you had to have a distance between people that were eating. So once again, it's another consideration.
Thank you very much. Trying to figure out the will of council here. Thoughts or questions? Anyone else? We have here the report, and the council deny the request for a patio extension due to the proposed patio extension occupying lands that are not zoned for the proposed use. Mover and seconder. Thank you. No, she didn't.
I'm not, this is sorry, through you, Mr. Mayor, this is a request to deny the request, so I'm not moving that.
I'll move it.
So which comes first, the deny or the request? Okay. Thank you. So the mover will be, Councillor Bachman.
Mayor Sloan, the motion reads, moved by Councillor Halpin, seconded by Councillor Bachman, that report AMDS 2323 regarding Barnacle's Beer House and Eatery, 170 William Street, request for extension of patio be received for information, and that council deny the request for a patio extension due to the proposed patio extension occupying lands that are not zoned for the proposed use.
All those in favor? Opposed? Motion fails. Pardon me, Councillor Graham.
So just on a point of procedure, Mr. Graves, so do we have to put through a motion to approve a temporary patio for this period of time, for this summer period of time?
Mr. Graves, please.
Well, council can put any motion they like on the floor. If that's your will, if that's what you'd like to do to approve a temporary, then you can do that. You've heard the advice of staff. And I would just suggest that the motion also include to receive the report, because that was part of the first motion as well.
Thank you, Mr. Graves. Councillor Graham.
So I'd like to make the notice of motion that we receive that report for information, but that we allow a temporary extension of their patio for this, say, May 1st to September 30th of this year, while they're in the process of doing the paperwork.
I'll need a seconder. Councillor Connors.
Mayor Sloan, the motion reads, moved by Councillor Graham, seconded by Councillor Connors, that report AMDS 2323 regarding Barnacle's Beer House and Eatery, 170 William Street, request for extension of patio be received for information, and that council approve a temporary patio extension for 2023.
All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. AMDS 2423, municipal led zoning bylaw amendment of the Talbot Line Industrial Lands. Any questions or comments on this after the report we've had, or if, yes, sorry, Councillor Halpin, please.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor Sloan. One of the key differences that I noticed between our written report and Mr. Aston's, although it was more or less the same, was that Mr. Aston specifically mentioned that he felt that a municipal led approach, which I assume he meant alternative to an upper tier led approach, would create a better opportunity for managing land compatibility. And so through you to Mr. McClure, in what ways is a municipal led approach better? And do you feel that this will help us to better manage buffering and boundaries?
Thank you, Councillor Halpin and Mr. McClure.
Thank you, Mayor Sloan, through you to Councillor Halpin. I may defer to Mr. Parent to the process, but ultimately, the municipal led approach is essentially that the municipality is leading the zoning bylaw amendment process, as opposed to what we generally would see, where it would be a private initiated landowner approach, we're able to look at it comprehensively and essentially apply a municipal lens on the balance or the entirety of the lands based on policy, as opposed to dealing with it in a piecemeal basis.
Follow up, Councillor Halpin? Okay, thank you. Any other questions or comments? Okay, do I have a mover? I don't have a mover. Oh, okay, go ahead, please.
Sorry. Oh, there we go. I'm live. Thank you. So through you, Mayor Sloan, I know that one of the goals here is to have land shovel ready, and I'd like to know what amount of this land already has municipal water servicing and so forth, and what does not.
Thank you, Councillor Halpin. Mr. Perrin, please.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Halpin. So the Elmer secondary water line runs along the north side of Highway 3. So it fronts all these lands front onto the municipal water supply. With respect to sanitary sewer, there is the ability to take approximately 170 acres of this land through the existing agreement with the city of St. Thomas, and be able to service it through the city of St. Thomas with that agreement.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, if I get a mover and a seconder, please. Deputy Mayor Noble. Councillor Buckman.
Mayor Sloan, the motion reads, moved by Deputy Mayor Noble, seconded by Councillor Bogman, that report AMDS 2423 regarding municipal lead zoning bylaw amendment of the Talbot Line Industrial Lands be received for information, and that a date for a public meeting be established in accordance with Ontario Regulation 54506 as amended.
All those in favor? Opposed and carried. Bylaws are public notice. Motions and notice of motion. For discussion, this is that staff be directed to report back to council on the possibility of using negotiations with contractors for construction projects as part of the tendering system for these projects. Can our staff investigate this option being made by other municipalities in Ontario? Questions or comments? Councillor Halpin, please.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor Sloan. Whose motion is this, and would you be willing to explain it?
Thank you, Councillor Halpin. It's Councillor Connor's motion.
Through you, Mayor Sloan, it's my motion. And the reason that I put the motion on the floor is that I believe at tender time, when you have a budget of X amount of dollars and you go over that budget, sometimes, and I've said this before, sometimes it's worthwhile going back to the contractors and negotiating with the low three and look for cost savings. And other municipalities do this across the province of Ontario. And why shouldn't we do it? We can save our constituents money, tax dollars money, and we can get better pricing along in the tender. Now, I went a little further and I consulted with Tim Doby, and Tim has said to me he was able to speak to the executive director of the Municipal Engineers Association of Ontario, who indicated to him that there are some municipalities, typically the larger municipalities, that are using this option of negotiating with contractors. The Municipal Engineers Association person indicated that most municipalities award the tender to the low bid, and then they have in their documents a clause that allows them to negotiate. So if other municipalities are doing this, then why aren't we?
Thank you, Councillor Connors. Councillor Graham, please.
And just to follow up on Councillor Connors' comment, in one of our bylaws, bylaw 2448, part 5, 13(1)D, the procurement coordinator may acquire any goods or services through negotiation where the lowest bid exceeds the estimated cost and it is impractical to recall the bid. So by all means, I think that we should investigate it, but it says right in our bylaw that we're allowed to do that. So I think we can abide by that bylaw for any negotiations where any bid would come in over cost.
Councillor Halpin.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor Sloan. Yes, I'm aware that in our bylaws, it does say that negotiation is an option. But we did also receive legal counsel on February 13th that said that both for legal reasons and for strategic reasons, it can be better not to take that approach and that you can cause alienation. So I'm curious about, because we've already paid for that legal counsel, why we would recommend to staff that they go and seek additional counsel about the alternative and how much we plan to spend to find out what we can do on this.
Thank you. Councillor Connors, please.
Through you, Marcelon, yes, you're right. We did receive counsel on that, but the reason that we received counsel on that was because we didn't have the wording in the tender documents to allow us to do that. And I'm proposing that we change that wording to allow us in the future to be able to go back to the low bidders and talk to them if we're over budget.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor Sloan, I believe that we did have that wording and that was not actually what created the issue there. Could staff confirm whether we have wording that allows negotiation in our RFT process?
Thank you, Councillor Halpin. Mr. Graves, please.
Mr. Mayor, if this helps, I think we understand what the motion is and you'd like some investigation, and we'll look into it and come back with further information for council on this. I think that would be the easiest to do, rather than to, you know.
Okay, Councillor Connors, please.
Yes, I took it one step further, and I spoke to Archana about this because Archana is the head of procurement, and Archana confirmed that we cannot do this with our regulations right now. So that's why I brought it as a motion to investigate and then report back to see what other areas are doing.
Understood. Thank you very much. Councillor Graham.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Archana. Archana, are you saying that bylaw 2448 part 5 13(1)D is not applicable?
Through you, Mayor, that's not correct. What it was is in that particular situation where the council has actually declined that particular that particular project. It was in reference to that. So when Mr. Councillor Connors and I had the discussion, it was very clearly about the Front Street projects where we were suggested and legal advice had come in not to go for this kind of bid shopping. So it was a very particular case where I had advised not to do that and stick with the legal advice.
Thank you.
Hope that clarifies the answer.
Councillor Graham.
So just for future reference, this bylaw, if you didn't have what you're saying, I still don't completely understand why this bylaw, it's a bylaw, so it should pertain to any issue or any project that we have because it's one of our bylaws. So moving forward though, again, it would pertain to any issue because it's written in our bylaws. I'm still not sure why just legal counsel, if council makes that decision and we direct you to follow the bylaw 2448, that you would be doing that, we could go back and negotiate with the contractors as outlined in the bylaw, correct?
That is correct. And sorry, Mr. Mayor, yes, that is correct. And it's not that, as I will mention it again, that it was a very particular case where I and Councillor Connor had discussions and it was only about Front Street at the time.
Thank you. We have a motion to get, as Mr. Graves said, some more information on this as per the discussion, and that suits the will, I think, of the proponent. Could I get a mover and a seconder? Councillor, oh, who's my mover? Oh, geez, I'm getting schooled by everyone. Councillor Watson, seconding. Do we need to read it again? Sure.
Mayor Sloan, the motion reads, moved by Councillor Connors, seconded by Councillor Watson, that staff be directed to report back to council on the possibility of using negotiations with contractors for construction projects as part of the tendering system for these projects. Can our staff investigate this option being made by other municipalities in Ontario?
All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you very much. Other business, now to enter closed session. If I could get a mover and a seconder. Would you like to have a break? Sorry, Councillor Connors, you have the floor, sir.
Thank you, Mayor Sloan. Other business, I'd just like to put on the floor the fact that I'd like to, and I'm sure other councillors would like to conduct town hall meetings. And I have one that I've been speaking to, and I'm looking at a June 1st or a June 8th date. But I need council to agree to other councillors being able to have town halls in the future. This particular one would be probably, it's $50 to rent the hall. And I had talked with Wendell about this and we decided that I would bring it up at this time. So It's on the floor.
Sorry about that. I didn't mean to jump other business. I apologize. I also spoke with Mr. Graves about a couple of ideas for town halls in Belmont, Port Stanley. So a good discussion to have. Mr. Graves?
Well, I think procedurally it would be, your worship, if just get consensus from council to sort of talk about this. It's another item that's being brought up, and then concurrence to work through this. I think it'd be a bit of a pilot project to put some bones on it and to try it. And other council members may be interested as well.
If I may, and I know that Sir Connors has a particular area for yours in Lyndhurst. We have the Belmont Arena, we have the Port Stanley Arena. If we would have the opportunity to go forward with those, I think we could schedule those at the same time if there was the will of council.
So in my discussions with Wendell, one of the things that came out was he indicated that whatever counselor it was in whatever area it was, that person would have to chair the meeting. And then the other counselors and mayor or deputy mayor can be there with that person. So I don't know if you still.
Mr. Graves and then Councillor Halpin, please.
Well, I think there's a few elements to it, and you know, I think we can have some flexibility. But if all of council or majority of council thought they were going to attend, then it really should be deemed like a special meeting of council. And then it would seem appropriate that the ward representative could chair the meeting. That can happen. And I think there was some discussion about, having some minutes taken. So there's a record of what people were saying and those kinds of things. So it would be a municipal event, a town hall hosted in individual wards. The municipality would pick up if there was minor cost for the rental or whatever to move forward. So.
Thank you, Councillor Halpin.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor Sloan. What Mr. Graves said partly did answer my question. I was wondering about whether there would be a limit to the number of council members that could be present and so forth. And it sounds like you've planned for that. The other part of my question was, what do you have in mind for your format for this? Are you planning on it being a town hall with a specific sort of set of topics that you're talking about, or more of an open house style where people can come in and address things? Or how did you sort of envision that?
If I could interject, because I've thought about it for the Port Stanley, and I'll pass on to you in a minute. I think the open house style is the best, or what I was considering. So maybe communication, some discussions about various issues, maybe a bit of a presentation on some of the challenges we're facing, some of the things that have gone through, and then I'll open it up for questions. But more of a bit of a mix and mingle for what I had thought about in Port Stanley or Belmont. Mr. Councillor Connors.
Yes, open forum is kind of the way I like to go. And I mean, I have a list of things. Different councillors have asked me, what do you want in your area? What do you want for your area? And I said, well, the people have told me, well, I went around and I knocked on doors that this is what they want, but I can't take a list of 25 things into council and say, okay, I need all these things done. So what I'm hoping to attain at the end of the night is a short list of maybe 2 or 3 items that I could talk to council about, or we could possibly do something about. I think that it's important that all of council attends all of the town hall meetings so that I understand what's going on in Councillor Watson's area, and he understands what's going on in mine. And I think that everybody needs to know what the issues are in the area and what people are trying to do. But I think that one of the ways I'd like to lead into this at this meeting is something that Mr. Perrin spoke about with me a few meetings ago, where he could develop something and say, look, this is what we've done in Ward 4 over the last 5 years, over the last 10 years. And this is the money that we've spent. And I would start off with a presentation like that so that the people understand that they've already received quite a bit. And now what's our short list of things that we want to get? Basically, it's about, us talking to them and trying to figure out what they want in our areas, and then us bringing it forward to council and trying to get that resolution so they feel they're getting something.
Thank you, Councillor Connors. Councillor Halpin, please.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor Sloan. I love what you're proposing. The only thing that I'm thinking of that I'm concerned about is that I think that open house style will facilitate great conversation, but it would be very hard to take minutes on. So instead of talking about doing several of these on, say, the same date, could we talk about doing them on different dates so that any given councillor could hope to have the mayor and the deputy there?
Absolutely, it'd be different dates. Yeah, this is just for me. This is Ward 4. So I think I've got June 1st or 8th nailed down. So it's just for me, then other people can do other dates.
Wonderful,
Councillor
thank you.
Connors. Okay. Any more direction, Mr. Graves, or?
Well, I think maybe just maybe a motion that would just state that council endorse the concept of holding town hall meetings in various wards. And we'll move forward from there.
Yep, Councillor Connors is my mover.
Yes.
Councillor Halpin is the seconder when you're.
Mayor Sloan, the motion reads, moved by Councillor Connors, seconded by Councillor Halpin, that council endorse the concept of holding town hall meetings and that staff be directed to support the hosting of town hall meetings.
All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. If we could go into closed session, or we're now, if we could go into closed session, if I could get a mover and a seconder. Councillor Bachman. Councillor Graham. Or sorry, Councillor Connors. Sorry. I don't have my glasses on.
Mayor
Yep.
Sloan, the motion reads, moved by Councillor Bogman, seconded by Councillor Connors, that council proceed into closed session at 9:01 PM in order to address a matter pertaining to a position, plan, procedure, criteria, or instruction to be applied to any negotiations carried on or to be carried on by or on behalf of the municipality or local board, and a proposed or pending acquisition or disposition of land by the municipality or local board.
All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. We live? Okay. Go ahead. Mover and a seconder, please, to adjourn closed session and return to open session. Councillor Connors and Deputy Mayor Noble.
Mayor Sloan, the motion reads, moved by Councillor Connors, seconded by Deputy Mayor Noble, that council adjourn from closed session and return to open session at 10:05 PM.
All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. CS2 170 Main Street, Port Stanley. If I could get a mover and a seconder. Councillor Connors, Councillor Halpin.
Mayor Sloan, the motion reads, moved by Councillor Connors, seconded by Councillor Halpin, that the confidential report be received for information and that council declare the Main Street road allowance south of the Main Street roundabout and adjacent to 170 Main Street as surplus to the municipality's needs, and that council directs staff to undertake the necessary proceedings to close the Main Street road allowance south of the traveled portion from Main Street, and further that staff proceed as directed.
All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. CS3 Hawksgate Road Allowance Widening. Mover and a seconder. Councillor Bachman. Councillor Halpin. Thank you.
Mayor Sloan, the motion reads, moved by Councillor Bachman, seconded by Councillor Halpin, the closed session item CS3 regarding Hawksgate Road Allowance Widening be received for information and that staff proceed as directed by council.
All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Now our bylaws. Bylaw number 2788. Could I get a mover and a seconder? Councillor Connors, Councillor Halpin.
Mayor Sloan, the motion reads, moved by Councillor Connors, seconded by Councillor Halpin, that bylaw 2788 be read a first and second time.
And I need another mover and seconder. Right? Oh, sorry, pardon me, could we vote on that, please? All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Bylaw 278 be read a first and second time, mover and seconder. Third and final time. Deputy Mayor Noble, Councillor Watson.
Mayor Sloan, the motion reads, moved by Deputy Mayor Noble, seconded by Councillor Watson, that bylaw 2788 be read a third time and finally passed.
All those in favor? Opposed? Carries. And for adjournment, a mover and a seconder, Councillors Bachman and Councillor Connor.
Mayor Sloan, the motion reads, moved by Councillor Bogman, seconded by Councillor Connors, that the regular meeting of council dated Monday, April 24th, 2023 be adjourned at 10:08 PM and that the next regular meeting of council be scheduled for Monday, May 8th, 2023 at 7:00 PM.